If I call myself anything, it's a social media smarty pants because I know enough to be dangerous and I love social media. I think it should be fun.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax. HIPAA help is on the way.
Welcome to the Help Me with HIPAA.com podcast. Today we have a special guest, and before I introduce her, I do want to say hello to Donna. How's it going today, Donna?
I'm operating barely within acceptable parameters today.
And this time it is not alcohol related.
No. I don't know why you pegged me to always be that way. Not saying it's never that way, but
I just, if you have a chance to paint a picture for people, you might as well do it.
I'm fun to party with. That's all you need to worry about.
Yeah, I hate I'm not going to be at the HIMSS conference with you coming up. That's something to miss, unfortunately.
I'm getting well. I'm loading up on all kinds of things to get this asthma cleared and flu cleared so that I am ready for Vegas, baby.
The question is Vegas ready for you? I'll say no. So for those of you who have who've listened to us before, you kind of know the format, you know who we are. For the new listeners, my name is David Sims, and I am with HIPAA for MSPs, and Donna is with Cardin Compliance. And we have joined forces to bring you the Help Me with HIPAA podcast. And we have a website at helpmewithhipaa.com. And after you finish listening to this, we're going to ask you to go over to iTunes and review us and rate us and all that. But today we have a special guest, so we don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about us. We want to bring in Janet Kennedy of GetSocialHealth.com. And what Janet has is a really cool website as well as a podcast. She's a fellow podcaster, and she has a podcast called Get Social Health. And it's about social media and how it's being used by hospitals and medical practices and healthcare practitioners and even patients to connect and engage via social media. And we do often get some questions around social media and what's acceptable and what's not. And so we thought that Janet would be a perfect fit to bring into the podcast. So welcome, Janet. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, good day, Donna and David. Very happy to be here.
Glad you could be here. So tell us a little bit about you and why you thought it was a good idea to jump into social media and healthcare.
Well, in many ways, it's because I want to serve. I have been in marketing my whole career. I am a social media early adopter, and I will never use the term maven, guru, expert, specialist. As a matter of fact, if I call myself anything, it's a social media smarty pants because I know enough to be dangerous and I love social media. I think it should be fun. I don't think you should be afraid of it. I think if you're not enjoying yourself in social media and feeling like you're really engaged and committed, then what's the point of being there? And as I transitioned my career in a lot of different, working in a lot of different industries and became more involved in healthcare, I was really shocked and dismayed to see how few healthcare organizations were even dabbling in social media, let alone fully committing. My marketer hat said, this is a huge opportunity for you to build your brand, to share information. My patient hat said, but people have so many questions. Why aren't you providing answers? And my social media persona is like, this is so easy to reach people and it's so easy to share information. Why are you not there? So I really felt the need to take the knowledge that I had and make it available to everybody else in the healthcare field.
Okay. Very good. Now, how have you had this idea of social media and healthcare? How has that been received? Because I know some people, I guess you have the spectrum like we deal with, where some people don't do anything the way they should be doing it with social media. And then you have the other side where nobody will do anything with social media because they're scared to death of what they might do on social media. How has that been received?
Well, honestly, my trying to reach people who don't like social media or aren't active in social media via social media is a fool's errand. So So when I'm online and I'm talking social media and healthcare, I'm pretty much singing to the choir. These are the people who have at least accepted the idea that social media is a place for them to be. Now, I run into a lot of newbies as well as the folks who are early adopters. And when I run into a newbie, particularly in a tweet chat, someone will say, it's my first time, or a blab, it's my first time. I'm all about, hey, here's how you reply to people. Here's how you mention people. And I'm very much let's get you off the ground and get your 101 level information going so you can participate. Because I do feel there are people I tried that LinkedIn thing. I tried Twitter. It didn't work because they really didn't understand the 101 level of how can you just establish your presence and engage online. So I like to get a lot of the basics out of the way. So I just love to teach. And that's what led me to doing webinars and doing workshops and really doing a lot of one-to-one engagement. And it just occurred to me, there's so many more people who need this information. That's why I took the content that I had been developing and retranslated it into the Get Social Health Academy, which are online courses in social media for healthcare.
Okay, that's awesome.
Well, it's certainly a niche. That'll for sure when you say social media, but social media for healthcare, because that ties directly into so much of what we do, right?
Well, and I think the challenge for particularly a smaller healthcare practice that may not even have a full-time marketing person is that the person who's going to end up doing the social media tends to be kind of one of two people. It's either the young person at the front desk who just graduated from college and you know the Facebook, so now you're our social media coordinator, or it's the 20-year practice management professional who has been running the business side and, oh, well, you've placed our want ads and you've bought the ads over here. So that makes you our digital marketing director. And they're all going hands up. No way. I have no idea how to do this. And the problem is you can't go buy Facebook for Dummies and have it apply 100% to healthcare. So that's why I felt the need to do this. I'm not trying to teach somebody how do you open a Twitter account or how do you make a Facebook post. Pretty much everybody understands those basics from their own personal use, or there's tons of tutorials on that. What I'm trying to do is say, if you are a physician's practice and you have committed to the idea of being in social media, here's how you get started. Here's the minimum level you need to do. And if you're not going to commit to this, you probably shouldn't do it. Or if you are doing it begrudgingly, people will know and sense that. So don't do the generic, only thing you post is Happy Valentine's Day, Happy St. Patrick's Day, Happy Thanksgiving. When I see those kind of Facebook accounts, I'm like, you'd be better off just to close it down. Because if you can't be there to serve, then there's no purpose to be there at all.
Right. So I guess one of the things that we preach a lot about here at Help Me with HIPAA is having policies and procedures around what you're doing in your practice with everything from, security and privacy and all that. How does that play into social media? Do you talk about the policies and procedures around that, or is that just something you say you need to have this and you don't really want to get into the details of it, but you let them know that that's something that they need to have?
Well, that's actually a very big part of the getting set to participate in social media, is that you shouldn't even do it until you have a social media policy. And the policy is not just to protect your practice. It's to protect the people who are, in essence, on the front line. If you haven't taken the time to sit down and do guidelines of what's appropriate and what's not, you're leaving staff members hanging out to dry, and that's not good. The other thing is it also protects your patients, many of whom do use social media. They're not professional marketers. They use it for fun. They, talk to their families. They mistakenly think that because they only have 50 Facebook friends and they're all family, that somehow that makes it private. And if they don't understand that, when you post on our Facebook page and say that thing, it's still ugly, that's fine that you have posted personal health information that was your choice, but that even for the healthcare practice to respond to that information, in essence, is putting the two things together, the protected health information and the medical information, which now becomes a HIPAA violation for your healthcare practice. So that they're going to have to delete that information, and they're going to have to respond to you to say, hey, here's our email address. Here's how to talk to us. As a matter of fact, something new that has just been released by Facebook is if you have a patient who has commented on your page, you can now private message them within that news feed. So you don't have to go to a private message because you can't. As a business, I can't reach out to David Sims' personal page. You're not allowed to do that. Facebook has put a wall up. But if David Sims comes to my business page and makes a comment that I need to respond to, but it needs to be private, you can do that within the news feed. So that's actually really exciting. And the only thing you should do is say, hey, let's take this conversation offline. Be aware that we can't talk about this in Facebook. And then you give them your contact information. So that certainly is very helpful for Facebook. And I hope will encourage healthcare organizations to step into Facebook and use it more, because that's takes away a barrier that they've had before.
Right.
And then you hit on something that often there's some confusion over. They'll say, well, the patient started the conversation, so I can now answer the patient and it's okay. And to get people to understand that, that's a huge point of, yeah, the patient said it, but the patient's still releasing their own information. You cannot provide any response whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And often, and particularly in the cases where, oh, you're 20 years old and you understand the Facebook, so you're our person. We know that those millennials overshare. They overshare.
Mm-hmm.
And so having your policies in place is a major step to start. And even if you're going to have that 20-something that understands social media, you better make sure they understand privacy compliance.
Exactly. And when I talk about having a social media policy, the first thing I do, of course, is say, disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer. And no matter what policy you create, get your lawyer to bless it before it goes back. For instance, some people would consider I need to be very specific. It's a policy. It's important. So you can't do this in Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest. Well, guess what? Now there's Blab and there's Periscope and there's Vine and there's Snapchat. So by being too specific in your social media policy, you're actually opening yourself up to confusion. So it does take a little bit of nuance to create a policy. But for a hospital system, which is dealing with a lot more people than, say, a physician's practice, I actually recommend 3 social media policies. There's your Bible, the one that goes into your operations manual. It's totally blessed by the lawyers, and it is here's the deep line, point by point, that we want to assess, and includes how do you respond. If someone says something, whether it's they gave too much information and you need to respond to say, let's take this offline, or if somebody's complaining and upset about something, what is the process for response? Then the second policy is you take all of that and you try to make it a one-sheeter, and that's for your team members. Because, for the most part, the majority of people who work at the hospital or the healthcare organization, they're going to have very little professional interaction with the page. So they don't need to know a lot of nuances about what's the standard response. They need to know how to use their personal social media use in a professional manner, and what is or isn't acceptable to do at work, whether it's time or whether it's not bringing your camera out. What's your BYOD, your bring your own device policy? And then the third policy I recommend is the very simple one that's definitely on your website and on all of your social media properties in such a way that says, view our patient guidelines. And whether you have to link to something else or you can actually post them there. And that's the very simple statements like, be nice. That we don't authorize, we're not going to allow any kind of harassment or negative comments about other people, blah, 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 blah. But you need to let your patients know, even to a point of you should print some of this out and you should have it posted in public places in your practice. For instance, if you have patients who are in the waiting room, or especially in the emergency room, and they're taking their camera out to snap pictures, this is a pretty solid guarantee that they're going to pick up a picture or a piece of someone else. And that person is not given permission to be there. But if they're checking in on Facebook or in Swarm and that picture's posted, in essence, that's publishing through that organization's social media, possibly a violation in a picture. So letting your patients know that please respect other patients' privacy. We don't allow photography in the common areas of our healthcare organization or something. But it's a lot easier to have that posted and tell people ahead of time than to have the security guard go over and go, hey, put that camera away. You can't do that, because that's going to give you a social media backlash you don't want to deal with.
So before we get into talking a little bit about what kind of things that somebody can do to start promoting their business or their practice, what do you typically do when somebody comes to you and they say, okay, I see there's like a dozen different social media platforms that everybody says I need to be on, which you and I both know you can't be everywhere all the time, or you lose focus on anything getting done. Do you start people out or recommend they start out with one or two? And if so, what are those platforms?
Well, actually, the first place I start them is with their marketing plan. And if they don't have a plan for how they would use social media platforms, then all they're going to do is waste time, money, and energy. So the first place to start is, why would you want to be there and how are you going to use it? How are you going to maintain it? Do you have resources? Do you have budget? Do you have time internally, or are you going to have to hire externally? If you are, how much guidance do you have? What's your goal for this? So before you even start in social media, you need to have a plan, because it isn't that you have to be there because everybody else is there. It's you need to be there because your patients are there, but because you're committing to the idea of being there. So that's the first thing, is have a marketing plan before you do it. The second thing I would recommend is an audit. And that is an audit to look at your own professional profiles, as well as what are your competitors doing. The competitor part is pretty straightforward. You know who they are. Go look and I have a checklist actually. If people text reputation, oh, hang on, I'll come up with that at the end and I'll share it with you. But I've got a checklist of places that they need to go to check out their profiles. But they look at what the competitors are doing. And if you find out that none of your competitors are in Pinterest, well, you know what? Maybe you don't need to be there. Or maybe that's an opportunity for you to take over Pinterest if it matches the type of practice you have. And then the third thing is, I recommend people go audit their own profiles. And the reason is because places like Google Local or Google Business and Facebook are scraping information off the web. And you would be shocked and amazed at how many healthcare practices actually have a de facto Facebook page that is unclaimed. Because if there is a business name and listing, it's going to go into Facebook. And when patients pull out their phones, and we know that right now we're going to be upwards of 80% of Americans having a smartphone by the end of next year, and that we know that 64% of them have checked health information online, that chances are they're sitting there idling time away and they're on Facebook and they get a little message that says, do you want to check in? If they check in, chances are somebody has already checked in before them, and that address is now identified. So I have a number of examples of healthcare practices that literally have likes, shares, pictures, comments, reviews, and that practice has never claimed that page. And it's shocking to me. So, and that is in almost any social platform that's out there, because they're all scraping from the same information source.
So whether you want to or not, you're getting some type of publicity.
Yes, that's exactly right. Whether you want to be in social media or not, you are already there. Whether it's a physical page that has de facto been created, or people are just talking about you. So, when I mentioned, have a marketing plan, know what you want to do, decide if you want to go into social media, you are in social media. So why don't you figure out how to manage it to your advantage rather than be on the defensive of how can you maybe wall the garden in, which we all know is, what is it, the expression, the tighter you grip, the more things will fall through your fingers.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you typically recommend people push the visitors to their social media accounts back to their website, or to run social media completely separate?
Oh, no, I am a huge believer in the hub and spoke of all your online effort is your website. And the other thing that many healthcare practices are behind on is the fact that you have to have a mobile optimized website. And not only is it just a good thing to do, if you don't have a mobile optimized website, what's going to happen is Google is going to start to de-rank you in searches because they're all about serving their customers, we, the patient, the citizen. And they know that we are using our cell phones and that we are more than 50% of the websites are accessed via phones. So they're saying if you have a crummy website and you have buttons too small to click, you don't have good information, the photos won't resize, and it's just a mess, you're doing a disservice to the customer who wants to find information. And we don't care if you're healthcare or the emergency room or anything that I have to find, a pharmacy. What they're saying is you are providing a bad customer experience. Therefore, we're going to give more ranking to those people who are providing a better online experience. So number one, mobile optimize your website. And number two is all of these other platforms, there are new ones coming up all the time. There are old ones that are falling apart or disappearing or not being used. And why would you want to build your house on rented land? Whereas you own and control your website, to give ownership of your content to anyone else, to any other platform, is really wasting your time. Use those platforms as you can, but always make sure you're driving them back to your website.
Okay. So what kind of things can somebody do to promote their business if they're getting started in social media?
Well, the main thing is be what you are. So as opposed to promoting, hey, we have a special on teeth cleaning this week, why don't you post information about, did you realize that these fruits are worse for your teeth than these fruits? Or here's some information on, whitening. If you use this product, it's been discovered to X. By the way, here's what a root canal is. I bet you didn't even know that. And there's all kinds of information about that. So I'm using dentistry for instance, but basically provide information that your patients would be looking for, and then you're going to become much more in front of them. But if all you're doing is posting sale of the week or discounts or, hey, here's our awesome doc, and this doc is really, really cool, but you don't say why, then, you're missing an opportunity to both personalize your practice and make you seem more like engaging individuals, but you're also not serving their need, which is if someone's out there online, they're probably looking for information. I need a pediatrician in, North Raleigh. How do I find them? Do you have that information on your website so that Google would scrape it so that would provide that information? And if they come to your website and all they see is a billboard that says, here's our address, here's our phone number, and here's the lovely picture of our front office with nobody in it, what does that do? Whereas if you have a blog or you have content that has, all these really interesting articles about baby care or, how to handle the flu or, a fun video about, vaccinations don't have to be so challenging because look at this. I don't know if you've seen the video of the doc that, is pulling out all these tissues and the kid is so entertained he didn't even realize he had the shot. So there's a lot of ways to build content for your sites that is engaging and personal and fun, but also leads to thought leadership and authority and knowledge about your skill set.
Okay. So it's all about providing value over trying to make a sale or, I guess going around about trying to gain a new patient by not trying to gain a new patient, but just providing value, provide value. And then when it's time for them to make that decision, then they're going to come to you automatically.
Well, yes. And what will happen is if you're providing a lot of information that they need, when you have someone, whether they're coming new to town or, 19% of patients will Google their existing physician because they want to make sure that they validated and they made the right choice. So even your current patients are looking around and seeing what you're doing in social media. So you kind of can't turn your back on it. But if what you're doing is providing the information that answers questions and solves problems, for instance, if you do a surgical treatment and here is the standard process of how, once you leave the office, how you should take care of your illness or your injury, you're sitting in the office, nobody hears a word that's said. And you get a piece of paper and they're like, what? But if you got a video that says, okay, here's the wound care for this, boom, 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 and you're directing your patients to your YouTube channel that has all these, simple sitting at the desk explanations of here's what you do, you are going to make people feel more comfortable with your knowledge. They're going to engage better with you. They're going to know who you are before you come. And the interesting thing is I was just speaking to a Google expert this morning, and he was saying that there was a dentist in the Charlotte area who, because they had so much content on their website, he was finding that they were spending less time in the office, not because the patients were feeling rushed, but because they already had some basic questions answered. They weren't having to go over a lot of the simple things that was new to that patient, but maybe have been heard 1,000 times by the physician. So provide that information and be that resource so that other than the couple times a year you go into the doc, you actually consider your doc to be a source of health information.
Yeah, that's what we call in the IT field a knowledge base. You create a knowledge base to answer questions so that people don't ask you the same thing over and over again.
Correct.
So before we dive into some great horror stories, by the way, did you have opportunity to listen to our Halloween episode back in October?
Oh, actually, that was one of the first that I went for. I was like, I love these scary stories. Yeah, it is unfortunate that many of the incidents that happen, the HIPAA-related incidents, really have nothing to do with anyone's willful disregard. It has more to do with ignorance of what's appropriate or really what's, kind.
Yeah.
Common sense. Oops, that thing.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which, and I'm not really sure which category that might fall in, but yesterday, as I'm flipping through the HIPAA news, I see that in Los Angeles, California, there is a physical therapist who is having to pay a $25,000 fine because he took some of his patients' names and photographs and put them on his website without their authorization and created fake testimonials with that information. So, would you say that is appropriate or not appropriate?
There are problems with that on a couple of different levels. But I say it all started with this person. They had to have known what they were doing was incorrect, because it's only courtesy to ask someone, may I use your name? May I use your photo? May I reference you as a testimonial? That's basic business 101. That isn't a healthcare specific issue. That could be an issue in any industry. It just happens that this person is in an industry where he's going to get a $25,000 fine for doing that. So that's just crazy on that person's regard. But then stepping beyond that, really, it's almost vaguely criminal. They were intentionally making up information. And if healthcare lives and dies on credibility, that person has shot their career in the foot. Mm-hmm. And he'll need therapy for that.
So what other things should people be looking for or watching out for or making sure that they're not doing? We talked a lot about what they can do, but what should they not be doing?
Well, the interesting thing about physical therapy is, in regard to your question, is that is the one of the few healthcare areas where people are very eagerly sharing their stories. Hey, I had knee surgery. Look at me. I'm doing so much better now. Oh, here's me at the gym. Oh, there are a lot of ways that physical therapy can do some really great things in social media. It's made for video. It's made for photography. And indeed, most people, when they're going through physical therapy are usually pretty happy to share, hey, I'm doing so much better now. So it encourages that. That's all the more reason why that particular vertical needs to be very careful. And particularly them, dentistry, dermatology, cosmetic surgeons, plastic surgeons, basically anybody that has to do with physical exterior photography, they have to be very, very careful. And photography is more often than not the HIPAA violation that happens within the social media realm. So for instance, a similar story to what you're talking about, there was a cosmetic surgeon in, Los Angeles, who was having his website redone. And he went in and took old photos, but he had the eyes blackened out or whatever. And he thought he was doing a good job using these old photos, patient medical photos, as here's some of the work we do. Well, unfortunately, one of the procedures he did was for an individual who might have used a little too much cocaine. And he referred to this picture as here's somebody with a cocaine nose. Well, the rules in privacy are if the patient feels they recognize themselves, done, you're done. And that patient recognized themselves and said, hey, you can't do that. And now that physician is in a lot of difficulty with the law because of that. So with photography, it's is someone recognizable, and or are they the person who can actually give the authority to approve the picture. For instance, there was a situation with a student nurse had been working with a child in a cancer ward and was just felt very close to this child and had what she thought was an approval to just post a farewell. What a sweet child. I really loved working with him, blah, 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 blah. Well, she did not have approval from the person who should have given the approval and, ended up with HIPAA violations, apologies, and the nursing student having to leave the program. So, cameras, now that they are in everybody's pocket via the smartphone, are a real issue and something that definitely needs to be addressed in a complete team-wide social media policy and training.
Yeah, that's the whole smartphone thing.
Yeah.
You can have a whole conversation about that.
Mm-hmm. Just on what you can accidentally, people think it's so innocent. Well, I just took a picture of us at work. You know what? But over your shoulder was a patient coming out of a room or a screen with a patient information on it. And I could zoom in and I could see it. You can't make that assumption and use the cameras in any areas around work. You can't.
Right. Oh, well, there's even problems with if say a new mom wants to have a picture taken, that's fine. She can take a picture of her baby. But if the nurse takes the picture or is in the picture, now that's a problem. So it gets to be, very dicey. I know there are hospitals that literally have taken down their new baby wall. And I have to tell you, if you lined up 50 new babies, yeah, they look different, but I don't know that new baby belongs to anybody. They all look like Yoda to me, but...
Yeah. We work with OBGYN groups, and one of their issues is how, everybody's eager to post updated photos of their kids on their Facebook feed. Uh-huh. And then they kind of get insulted when somebody doesn't go, oh, they look so cute, and because I can't respond even in those cases. So it is a big issue, and getting that across to your patients matters. Just like you said, put it on your policies on your page, explain it to your patients, make sure they understand if you post something on here, it's on you, and we may take it down and we will not respond.
Right. Yep, absolutely.
And yes, I know they're adorable, but I can't do anything about that.
Yep. Well, and that speaks to the importance of no matter what kind of business you are, but particularly in healthcare, if you are thinking about having patient engagement photos, and they're perfectly okay. If you've got a patient just graduated from high school and they've been your patient for X amount of time and you want to post that with I love my dentist, that's great. Get it in writing. Have a form at the front desk where they say, I authorize you to use my photo whatever. And make sure you've got your language squared away, that if they thought it was going to be in Facebook and suddenly find themselves on the slider on your homepage of your website, that they're not surprised. Well, hang on, especially before and after pictures, that girl might have been really excited the day she got her braces off, but she probably didn't realize you were going to take her old picture and put it next to her the day she had zits or something. You need to be very clear with your patients what and how you're going to use those photos.
So right. Lots of written policies and procedures, lots of training, and making sure that your staff understands that Facebook is reality. It's not a place to play around out on any social media, and to think that no one's going to see it is ridiculous. It's just like in the news this week in Atlanta, there's a police officer who sent in a private message a video driving in his cruiser saying on a video clip how I'm not supposed to be doing Facebook while I drive. It's not allowed. It's against the law, and making these faces, and sends it in a private message. And the person that gets it says, this is inappropriate, and posts it and sends it on to authorities. And so now it's on the news. Even though you thought it was private, it's out there. Uh-huh. It's not. If you shouldn't be sharing it with anyone, you shouldn't be sharing it with anyone.
Absolutely. And that is how a number of people have run into problems, is the issue of honor system. And you maybe think you're sending a message to some friends on the floor, but if any of them really take the social media policy and the privacy of their patients seriously, they may look at that and say, yeah, that's not cool. I've got to report this. And suddenly your career is over.
Mm-hmm. In a big way, and not just your career, but you're affecting the business and potentially your patients. And it goes much further than just you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, that's one reason why I did create the Academy, is there are an awful lot of people who, if you're in a big hospital system, you probably have a training program that's going to cover a lot of this. There are a lot of small practices or assisted living centers or health-related organizations that if you're doing anything with insurance or medical care, this all applies to you, and they need that training that is very specific for them. That's also on a level that you're not trying to raise marketers here, but you want people to understand the basics and where it can go wrong, but also in such a way that it's easy to consume. So I define these courses in such a way that there's 3-minute videos, 5-minute videos, 7-minute videos. You can track where you are in the flow. So if you just want to catch a few here, a few videos there, and then eventually you'll get through the program, it's got to be accessible and easy to consume. Because if I had to sit down at a hour-long webinar, about halfway through, I'd go, oh, what? Or you want to refer back to something 60 days later, and you're like, I have no idea where that was. Can't find it. Where was that? So that's one of the things that I really feel is important, is providing the tools to prevent the problems. It's a lot easier to, show people what's appropriate and what's not appropriate before you even get into the situation than trying to clean something up afterwards.
Right. So what about the newcomers to the whole HIPAA sphere, the business associates? Have you seen any traction there yet, as far as the law firms or the billing services or even IT companies that have to do with HIPAA compliance as a business associate?
That's not where my focus has been, but that's very definitely where the weakest link in the chain is. Because the healthcare organizations themselves, as we know, have in many ways limited their own ability to be in social media because they understand the ramifications. But there are any number of organizations that have BAAs with a healthcare system that may be doing a good job of protecting their data, but may not understand, that when they're on campus to meet with a client and they snap a picture, that's a problem. So there's definitely a need to share the whole appropriate use of social media across the spectrum, and not just BAAs, but also, down to the custodial staff. They interact with patients more than anybody else. If you're not doing training that goes from, entry-level employee to the most senior CEOs and C-suite executives, you're not doing a good service, because the marketing people have access to all kinds of information, and they can get more information, some of which is free. It's the everyday staff, it's the cafeteria staff, it's the front desk, it's the volunteers that healthcare systems can't live without that need this training as well.
Right. Well, Janet, your information has been amazing. You obviously are well connected within social media and understand it fully. So how can people get in touch with you if they're interested in knowing a little bit more about what you do in your podcast and your courses as well?
Well, hopefully I'm very easy to find. And as a fellow podcaster, I encourage you to keep sharing information the way you are. That's really why I started my podcast, is because I felt like people weren't using social media because they didn't understand how or the best practices. I mean, it's one thing to look at the Mayo Clinic and their 17-member marketing staff and go, well, yeah, they can, but how do I? So I think if you go back and listen to my podcast, which you can find at getsocialhealth.com, you'll hear a lot of stories from solo practitioners, dental offices, agencies, small agencies that specialize in small healthcare practices. You get a lot of really good stories that it is doable and capable. So getsocialhealth.com for the podcast. And then if you're interested in learning more and sharing information with your staff about training in social media, you can find that at getsocialhealthacademy.com.
Okay, very good. Well, Janet, on behalf of myself and Donna too, if she can still talk okay.
I'm hanging in there, brother.
You're hanging in there. We really appreciate you coming on the show and talking with our audience.
It was my great pleasure. And I look forward to hopefully meeting you both in person at some future event. But in the meantime, we'll be friends online.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for listening to today's podcast, and head on over to Janet's site at Get Social Health and check that out. We'd also like to invite you to go to helpmewithhipaa.com, and you can leave a question right there on our site, and we may feature that question in a future podcast. We also ask that you jump over to iTunes and leave us a review and tell us how much you love our podcast and give us a 5-star rating, or 6-star if you can manage that. But I tried to get Donna to laugh and get all choked up, but she wouldn't do it. But anyway, for myself and Donna, remember that HIPAA is not about compliance. It is about patient care. Have a good day.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.